Okay, so let's talk a little bit about putting data into variables. So there's two ways that we can put data into variables. The first way is going to be using C++ assignment statements. And that's using the equal sign. And that's pretty much the same way as in math. You could put, say, x over here is the name of your variable, which is a bad variable name. But just for the sake of example, we'll use x. Let's say it's an integer. You could put like int x equals 1, or you could say that it equals 2 plus 7, or that it equals static. That's not how you spell static. Static cast int 1.5. It could literally, you can assign anything to any variable as long as you're assigning the proper type using the assignment statement. And then our second way is going to be using input statements, which is the cin operator, which is kind of like the cout operator, but instead of outputting to the screen, it takes in input from the keyboard. Let's dive into these things a little bit more. So first, let's talk a little bit about declaring a variable. And declaring a variable is telling the compiler the name and data type of a variable. And that looks just like this. Just you tell it its data type and the name. That's it. That is all declaring a variable does. It does not put any data into the variable. It keeps whatever data was in that variable prior to getting it. It keeps that data. And because we're getting that variable, when we say that, we're getting its memory from RAM, which could have anything in it. It could have 10, 11, 12, 1 million in it. So we need to initialize our variables as well. And that is using the assignment operator. And initializing is just placing a value in a variable for the first time. You may also hear this called defining. And we need to initialize because if we don't, we could have very bad consequences in our program. And initializing looks just like this. You can either use the assignment operator or you can use the insertion operator. So the assignment statement always looks like this. You're going to have some variable equals an expression. And I want to really drive home why you need to iterate, why you need to initialize your variables. So if we just make a variable called count, and later in our program, we want to say, take that count variable. Well, it wouldn't start there. It would start always on the right-hand side. So it's going to take count, whatever is in here, and place it in here. So, and then add 1 to it and place that back into here. So when we say this could be like 65. When in reality, if it's a counter, we would want that to be 0. So here we would put 65 in and we would get 66 out. And we would say, sad day, because we don't want that. We want it to be 1. So how can we fix that? We can say count equals 0. Or even simpler than that, we could come over here and say int count equals 0. So an integer example would look something like this, where you're just putting any integer into your integer value. This could be anything that equates to an integer on the side. Anything on the right-hand side could be anything that equates to whatever the left-hand side type is. So a float would look like this, double would look like this, a character would look like this, but a character would not look like this. Because we have to know this distinction between a string and a character, because a string is denoted by double quotes and a character is single quotes, which are not equal in C++. They are interchangeable in some other languages, but not C++. And then here's an example of how we could put a string into a variable. If we had this enumeration variable, we could put in, or this enumeration type, we could create a variable and place one of the two options we have into that variable. In this case, we can also put expressions into our variables, such as in this case, 1 plus 1 would get put into x, which gives us 2. Or in this case, it's not 9 times 1 plus 2. That's actually kind of a bad example that it's times 1. It should be something more like times, we'll say, 2. So then over here, we don't get 11. We get 14 plus 2, which is 16, plus 2, which is 18. We could also do something like static cast gets put into a variable. We could put anything, as I've been saying, into anything into its proper data type on the left-hand side. And this assignment operator is a binary operator, since we have a left-hand side and a right-hand side. Then we have the input statement, which is some pretty simple syntax. It's just cin, this little operator, which is the stream extraction operator, and then into a variable. This variable can be any simple data type. And then a little example of how this works is we're going to take, so this is just the command line, is all that $sign denotes. And say our program's running and this is in our program. And we get to this line. What's going to happen? Our program's going to wait until we input a number. And that number is going to get put into I. And then I will then equal whatever number we put into there. Now it's important to note that cin, its extraction operator, is delimited by white space, which means if you put a space here, you wouldn't get 22 in here. You would still just get 2. Because when it hits this white space, this operator is going to stop reading. That's true for any white space. So spaces, tabs, new lines, etc. So this little guy right here, let's talk about it. And that's going to be the extreme extraction operator. And this is what he looks like. And what he does is takes input from the input stream delimited by white space. And all that delimited word means, again, is that it's going to stop at white space. And it takes that input from the input stream, and that's a word that you're going to hear a lot throughout all of this, but all that mean is any input taken in from. So let's now hop over to the computer and take a look at all of that. So we have our program here. Let's clear all that out. And we're just going to declare a variable. We're going to call it x. So the first way we're going to look at assigning x is we are going to use the assignment operator, and we're going to assign 5 to x. And let's just see out x and see what we get. Got to compile our program with G++, and then we can run it, and we get 5, which is the value we placed in here. But now we can also say cin x. And how is that going to differ? Well, we can compile with G++, as we always have to do after we edit our program. And then we can run our program with /a.out, and we can mess up. And then you see our program just kind of hangs right here. That's because it's waiting for our input. So we could put a number in, and look, we get output the number that we input. And that's true for any data type you put here. You could put a char here. And if we compile that with G++, as usual, and we run that program, you could put in an A. But what happens if we put in hello? Well, it just takes in the first character. And that's how you can take in data to variables that you have created.